So we're working in grade 4 using the 3-frame day, and the first frame is the thematic lesson, which is an integrated, art-infused introduction to some new content using a theme which is derived from where the children are developmentally. So there's 7 key steps in the thematic lessons. What I'll do is I'll quickly mention each step, and then I'll give you an example from our lesson today. So the first step is the morning circle, then there's the short task, then there's the questioning, then there's the cooperative or talking part of the lesson, then there's the main task, the story or the new content, and the question to take home. Morning circle runs for somewhere between an hour in the early years, grade 1, that would be maximum an hour, to right down to maybe 10 minutes in your middle school. The idea is it's a lively introduction to the day, and within the morning circle, this is the main time when we can incorporate the big 4, the intellectual quotient, spiritual quotient, kinesthetic and emotional. In our lesson today we had a song from one of our past themes, about the Kookaburra song, and then we had a Chinese poem and a Chinese song, and there was an Indonesian song in there as well, and some movements with that. And then we also had some sharing from the children and a little bit of news from the children as well.
Panic and crying to my bedroom. Me and my mother were like, oh my God, we went to the security. They said, it's okay, it's okay.
And there's the short task. Now the short task is the main transition for this whole 2-hour block, if you like. And it's a task that is really easy for the children to do. So my example today was copy the title and start making a border. The idea is that the children begin to make their book look good, and it's something they can do easily, that they can just come straight to their desk and move on to it. So, and it brings the focus from this lively sort of morning back to the desks. Then there's a period of questioning. Who was Hao Yi? Talk to the person next to you. Who was Hao Yi? And it's kind of Socratic questionings. It's questions that the children ought to know the answers to. And what I'm doing is bringing back the content, the new content from the day before, re-engaging them with some content which is in the theme. Then there's the cooperative or the talking task. Now, what we're trying to achieve here is the children practicing sustained speaking, using the art of grammar with each other. So I teach them how to paraphrase, I teach them how to cooperatively learn. And Cheng Ho was so excited that did she do? And all the while I'm walking around listening to the children to identify which ones are having difficulty stringing sentences together. And then if I notice that, I can offer some remediation for them. Then there's the main work content. So, for example, the children in the class are learning argumentative writing. So there might be some argumentative piece that I want them to do that's relating to the story. So if there's a myth about a foolish Chinese man who lives behind the mountains, and he wants the mountains to be moved, and the gods end up moving them for him. So justify your position if you were that foolish Chinese peasant. That might be an example of a task. Not only will I offer them that one task, but I'll offer them a more supported task and a more challenging task as well. So the children have got free choice as to what level of activity they want to participate in. There's 3 choices. You can either retell the story, so just rewrite it in your own words. You can retell the story but invent a new ending. Okay? Or you can write a discussion on the Emperor's reward. Okay, now a discussion looks like this. It has an opening, it has arguments for and against, and then it has your opinion at the end. This work part, imagine grade 1. The work is very small. Copy down the letter G and draw a picture of a goose next to it. However, as we move through as we progress through the year levels, that work task gets longer and longer. You would have noticed even my grade 4s on task for about 40 minutes with their writing task. Now, I've also worked with year 7s who will sit and work quietly for 1 hour on the work part. So as the morning circle shrinks through the year, the academic or the work content, when we're engaging that cognitive body, gets bigger and bigger. This story is called The Foolish Old Man Removes the Mountains. When that part of the morning is completed, the children move on to the new content or the new task. So in a mathematics or a science theme, it could be a maths concept or a science experiment. You might light a candle underneath a fan and watch the fan move around, and then say, consider that, children. Look at that. If it was an English or a global awareness theme, I might tell them a story from history or tell them a folk tale. She laughed at him. With your strength, old man, you can hardly move a small anthill. And from those stories, some academic content will arise. Final one, number 7, the question. So because in my science experiment with the candle and the fan, I'm going to bring that back to life the next day. I want to give them one question or one short task to consider overnight. So what do you think is happening here, children? When I return the next day in the questioning section, that will be the first question I ask. One of the great things about our thematic lessons is we're able to incorporate sleep into the learning cycle. So they've heard a story, they've seen a science experiment, or they've seen some concept, being allowed to sleep on it, and the next day I bring it back to life. Well, something I'd like you to consider tonight is what is the message behind this story? The other beauty of the thematic lessons is we're able to engage the whole human being. And what do we mean by that? We mean, in Green School, we mean the kinesthetic quotient, the cognitive quotient, the emotional, social quotient, and the spiritual quotient. So we acknowledge that human beings all those 4 aspects are included in every single human being. Instructional frame, which is the proficiency lessons, and this is core academic useful skills that the children really need to learn in maths and English to be able to progress year to year through any school, and then useful skills that they will have in life as well. So the children have just come back from their morning break. By this time of year, they know the routine. So they know that at the beginning of each mathematics lesson, there is some form of, I call it maintenance. It's basically revision. It can also include multiplication tables as well, learning their times tables. So they come from morning tea and their desks are all set up and ready to go, and the children know what to do. They just come immediately, sit down and get straight into it. And so that usually lasts for between 10 and 20 minutes. And from there, we take more of an individual path. So there is a skill, one skill which I identify, a skill that the whole class, it's a new skill for the whole class, or it's something that the whole class hasn't integrated yet. It might be more than 3/4 of the class hasn't got that. And so they're the skills I focus on for a whole class lesson. I've put 4 examples on the board here. you can still... So I'll introduce the learning intention, and this week it was converting measurements from metres and centimetres to metres with a decimal point. And so that's the one thing that I wanted them to learn. Now from the tasks, many other achievement objectives were learned or touched on through that time, like estimating distances, measuring things, measuring objects. However, the key thing that I wanted them to learn was that conversion. Listen boys, what you're learning is what I'm going to check. So make sure you know what your learning intention is, please. Talk to each other.
We're gonna do how to express lengths using decimal notation.
And so part of my behaviour management is actually walking around the room. If I think some children are off task, I can ask them, what skill are you learning in this lesson? So the whole feeling of the proficiency frame is much more directed and specific and targeted. Whereas in the thematic lesson, you would have noticed there was a lot more flow and more colour and more liveliness. There's liveliness in the proficiency lessons for sure, but it's a focused liveliness. It's driven by learning intentions. Now, the task that the children do can vary. So I might set the children an example. Well, this is how you might learn that task. Now, often the children will say, well, I can learn this a different way. Fantastic. Off you go. Or Sean, I already know this. Can I teach other children?
Make a 0 here.
Because for sure, a great way of learning a skill is by teaching it to others. Now, of course, some children learn the skill on the first day. Now, I wouldn't say to a child, well, you need to do that again and again and again. They know it. So as soon as they can come and demonstrate it to me, then that skill's ticked off and they move on to something else. Now, part of that is I have a criteria for success, which is very clear as well. So I think for today's one, it was show me 2 examples where you've converted from metres and centimetres to metres with a decimal point. So they would come up to me and demonstrate that. As soon as they've demonstrated it, they're finished, they can move on to something else. They can either extend themselves in that same learning objective, or they can move on to their individual learning plan. Now, at the beginning of the week, I'll set my proficiency lessons up with 3 sections. So, the school here calls it the TLC, your task, your learning, and your criteria for success. Now, of course, all the teachers can make it their own, and I've made it my own in a little way. I've put the learning intention at the beginning, because I think that's the most important part of a proficiency frame. So, what are you expected to learn in this lesson? And it's very clear, it's written up on my blackboard. What is the task? What is the process by which you will learn this? And I make sure the children understand that very clearly before I let them go free. And then, how will you know if you've achieved that learning intention? What's the criteria for success? TLC, task, learning, criteria for success. And so the children can come up to me and say, Sean, I've learned this, and I can prove it to you. Fantastic. You can move on. Now, if they achieve the learning intention of that particular skill, and they don't want to explore that area further, they can move on to their individual learning plan. For example, with an individual plan, here's Eloise's folder, and we open it up, and along here are the core skills to be learned, and along this column here is whether she's achieved it or not. And it's up to Eloise to monitor her progress. And it's also up to her to come and demonstrate to one of the teachers in here, yes, I've achieved this skill, and this is how I'm showing it to you.
This is how we do our individual plans. So, we figure out that we have to do something that isn't checked off already. So, we figure out that it's 5 and 14. So, we close our book. Sorry. Then we walk over here. to the box 5 and 14. And you look in it. And you find a worksheet that we want to use.
Because the children are in the driver's seat of their own learning, and I allow them to pair off into little work spaces, they pretty much design their own lessons, you know, with some facilitation from the teachers. It's clearly not a free-for-all, because when I'm walking around asking them, what are you learning right now, they're able to answer me. So rather than the teacher being the sage on the stage and it's my way or the highway, I set the learning goals. What I've noticed is, because my lessons are targeted and the children are only expected to learn one thing at a time, they tend to learn it a lot quicker. So although I might look at my core skills and say, well, that's only a small proportion of the achievement objectives, they're generally able to work through those core skills at a lot faster rate. And the enjoyment of mathematics is improved, because they're not being pushed, they're not being stressed. So the children are happy to keep working through them. There was a big transition at the end of the mathematics lesson, and we moved into the literacy block. And once again, I have a one hour lesson. That's what works for me. How to make words ending in S or double S into a plural. And the lesson has usually 4 learning goals within it. So there's a goal that's to do with maintenance again. So there's some aspect of revision. So today's revision was using a dictionary to find synonyms, a dictionary of the thesaurus to find synonyms. And then I share my literacy block into grammar, comprehension, spelling and reading. Now reading I treat slightly separately, and I have a 1 hour reading block in which I get around and listen to all of the children, and I mainly focus on the children who are still grappling with that skill. I've structured this lesson in different ways. Sometimes I have a tiered lesson where they're all working on grammar, they're all working on spelling, they're all working on comprehension. Right now I've got more of a workstation session where they can go from one place to the next, but that still wasn't working perfectly for me. So now the children are free to work at their own pace through each section, and then if they finish that, they can work on their individual plan. So very similar to what I showed you with the mathematics, they have a list just like that for literacy as well, which they can work through at their own pace, choosing their own resources and how they learn each individual skill. So some children pick up the skills very quickly through those lessons, and others take a bit longer, and so they might not get to the individual section. I make sure I give them 3 hits through the week at each skill. So I'll have, once again on my board, the TLC, the task, what I want them to do, the learning intention and the criteria for success. The learning intention might be how to make a word ending with S or double S into a plural. So it's very clear and discreet. And the task for today was to look at a list of words that end with S or double S and make that word put it into a sentence in its singular form, put it into a sentence in a plural form. Now, some children came up with different ways to learn it. Fantastic. But there's one example that they can use. Criteria for success was, tell me the rule. So what's the criteria for success? Read it.
Can state the rule.
So what's the rule?
So you have to add ES every single time.
Fantastic. You're achieved.
We already knew that.
There's a feeling of immediate success and immediate satisfaction because I've done it.